Emma, you look terrible. Her co-worker Jennifer stopped mid-stride, concern flickering across her perfectly made-up face. Are you coming down with something? I'm fine, Emma lied, forcing her feet toward the elevator even though every instinct screamed at her to run. Just didn't sleep well. She hadn't slept at all. How could she, knowing that someone was tracking her movements, learning her routine, waiting for what? She'd gone to the police yesterday, and the officer had been kind but ultimately useless. Has he threatened you? Approached you? Touched you? No, and no. Then there's not much we can do, ma'am. Keep a record. Call us if anything escalates. If anything escalates, as if she should wait to become a statistic before anyone would help her. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Emma stepped into the reception area of Sterling & Associates, the prestigious law firm where she'd worked as a paralegal for the past 3 years. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, but today all she could think about was how exposed she was up here, how visible. Emma! Her boss, Richard Sterling, barked her name from his office doorway. My office, now, and bring the Morrison file. She grabbed the thick manila folder from her desk with shaking hands and hurried into his corner office, where Richard stood with his arms crossed, his face mottled with anger. Do you want to explain to me why the Morrison deposition was a complete disaster yesterday? He didn't wait for her to answer. Half the exhibits were mislabeled, dates were wrong. It made us look like amateurs in front of a federal judge. Emma's stomach dropped. Mr. Sterling, I checked everything twice. I don't understand how... I don't want excuses. I want competence. He jabbed a finger toward her. You've been distracted for weeks. Phone calls during work hours. Stepping out constantly. If you can't handle the workload, I'll find someone who can. Sir, I promise, I've been completely focused on... David Harrison could do your job with his eyes closed, and he's been asking for more responsibility. Maybe it's time I gave it to him. Richard's eyes were cold. Consider this your only warning. One more screw-up, and you're done. He dismissed her with a wave, and Emma retreated to her cubicle, the folder clutched to her chest like a shield. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed at work. The exhibits hadn't been mislabeled when she'd prepared them. She'd quintuple-checked, because she knew how important the Morrison case was. Someone had tampered with her work, and she had a sinking suspicion who. David Harrison sat 2 cubicles down, and when she passed his desk, he looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Rough morning? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because on top of everything else, the stalker, the fear, the sleepless nights, now her job was in jeopardy too, and she needed this job. She'd worked so hard to claw her way out of the poverty she'd grown up in, to make something of herself. This position was supposed to be her foundation, her security. Now it was all crumbling, and she didn't know how to stop it. At lunch, Emma forced herself to go outside despite her fear. She couldn't hide forever. She walked to the small cafe 3 blocks away where she always ate, ordered her usual salad, and sat at a table near the window where she could watch the street. And there he was, gray jacket, baseball cap pulled low, standing across the street pretending to look at his phone but watching her, always watching. Her appetite vanished. She pulled out her own phone and did something she'd been avoiding for 2 weeks, something that felt like admitting defeat. She scrolled to a contact she'd saved but never called, Marcus Castellano. She'd met Marcus 6 months ago at a charity gala the firm had dragged her to. He'd been there with an entire entourage, commanding the room with the kind of presence that made everyone else seem like shadows. They'd talked for maybe 20 minutes. She'd spilled wine on his expensive suit jacket. And instead of being angry, he'd laughed and spent the rest of the evening at her side, making her feel like the most fascinating person in the room. He'd given her his private number and told her to call if she ever needed anything. Anything at all. She'd known even then what he was. Everyone in the city knew the Castellano name. They owned half the waterfront, controlled entire neighborhoods, and operated in that gray zone where business and criminality blurred into something the law couldn't quite touch. The kind of man her mother would have warned her about, if her mother had lived long enough to offer warnings about anything. Emma had never called. She'd been too smart, too cautious. too aware that getting involved with someone like Marcus Castellano was a one-way ticket to a life she wanted no part of. But now, watching her stalker across the street, feeling the walls closing in, she wasn't sure she had a choice. Her finger hovered over his name for a long moment before she set the phone down. No, she'd handle this herself. She always had. The afternoon dragged on with excruciating slowness. Emma could barely concentrate on the brief she was supposed to be reviewing. Every sound made her jump. Every time someone walked past her cubicle, her heart raced. She kept checking the time, counting down the minutes until she could leave, though the thought of the walk home filled her with dread. At 5:30, she gathered her things and took the elevator down with a group of other employees, staying in the middle of the crowd for safety. The lobby was busy with the evening exodus, and she let herself be carried along with the flow of people heading home. Outside, the autumn air had turned sharp and cold. Emma pulled her coat tighter and started walking, constantly checking over her shoulder. The street was crowded with commuters, which should have been comforting but somehow made it worse. He could be any one of these people. She wouldn't know until it was too late. She'd made it 2 blocks when she felt it again, that presence behind her. She glanced back and saw him, closer now than he'd ever been before, weaving through the crowd with clear purpose. He was following her home. He was going to find out where she lived, if he didn't already know. Panic seized her chest. She walked faster, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. She cut down a side street, hoping to lose him in the maze of downtown blocks. But when she looked back, he was still there, gaining ground. Emma's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. Her fingers found Marcus's number before her brain had fully made the decision. She pressed call and lifted the phone to her ear, still walking, still checking behind her. This is unexpected. His voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, controlled, with an accent that suggested European boarding schools and old money. Emma, isn't it? From the gala. I'm sorry to bother you, she said, hating how her voice cracked. You said if I ever needed anything, where are you? The playfulness vanished from his tone instantly, replaced by something sharp and focused. 5th and Madison. I'm being followed. There's a man, he's been... She looked back again and her blood turned to ice. He was right there, close enough that she could see his face clearly for the first time. Narrow eyes, scarred chin, and he was smiling. He's right behind me. I don't know what to... Cross to the north side of the street. Do it now. Marcus's voice had gone absolutely cold. There's a black Mercedes parked in front of the Continental Hotel. Get in. The driver knows you're coming. How did you... Move, Emma, now. She didn't question it. She darted between cars, ignoring the angry honks, and ran toward the hotel. Her heels caught on the pavement and she stumbled, nearly falling, but caught herself and kept going. Behind her, she heard footsteps running, and a hand grabbed her arm just as she reached the Mercedes. Got you, you little... The man's words cut off abruptly. Emma turned and saw another man, massive, built like a wall, gripping her stalker's wrist with one hand. Her stalker tried to pull away, tried to fight, but he might as well have been fighting a statue. In the car, the massive man said to Emma, his voice surprisingly gentle. You're safe now. The Mercedes's door opened and Emma threw herself inside, her whole body shaking. The door closed with a solid thunk that felt like a barrier between her and the nightmare outside. Through the tinted window, she watched the massive man say something to her stalker, something that made all the color drain from the man's face before he turned and practically ran down the street. The driver, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Mr. Castellano's estate, 15 minutes. Wait, I don't want to... But the car was already moving, pulling smoothly into traffic. Emma pressed her hand to her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. What had she just done? She'd called Marcus Castellano, a man whose business interests definitely didn't stop at legitimate real estate ventures, and now she was being driven to his estate like some kind of damsel in a Victorian novel. but as the adrenaline began to fade, leaving her exhausted and wrung out, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Someone had actually helped her. After days of fear and sleepless nights, someone had made her feel safe, even if that someone was dangerous in an entirely different way. The estate was outside the city, hidden behind high stone walls and iron gates that opened silently as the Mercedes approached. The house beyond was something out of a magazine, all glass and modern architecture nestled into mature landscaping that probably cost more than Emma made in 5 years. Lights glowed warmly from the windows as dusk settled over the grounds. The car stopped in front of the main entrance, and the driver opened her door. Mr. Castellano was waiting in the study. Emma followed a woman in an elegant black dress through a marble foyer, down a hallway lined with what looked like original artwork, and into a wood-paneled room dominated by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive fireplace where a fire crackled quietly. And there was Marcus. He stood at the window with his back to her, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass of what looked like whiskey. He was taller than she remembered, and the perfectly tailored black suit emphasized broad shoulders and the kind of physical presence that suggested he could be as dangerous as any of the men who worked for him. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Emma did, and suddenly the room felt very small and very intimate. Marcus turned to face her, and Emma's breath caught. She'd forgotten how striking he was. Dark hair that was slightly too long, sharp cheekbones and eyes so intensely blue they seemed unreal. But it was more than physical beauty. It was the way he moved, the way he looked at her, like he was seeing things she'd never meant to show anyone. "Tell me everything," he said. "Start from the beginning." So she did. She told him about the man in the gray jacket, about the police who couldn't help, about her boss threatening her job. She told him about the terror of being followed home, of feeling like prey, of not knowing who to trust. The words poured out of her in a rush, and Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing colder and more focused with every detail. When she finished, silence filled the study. Marcus set down his glass with careful precision and crossed to stand in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Who's following you?" His voice was soft, deadly. "I'll solve that permanently." The promise in those words should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of tension she'd been carrying for days. "I don't know who he is," she said, "but Marcus, I don't want you to, I'm not asking you to, you're not asking. I'm telling you." He lifted one hand and brushed a strand of hair back from her face, and Emma's skin tingled where his fingers grazed her temple. "No one touches what's mine." "I'm not," she swallowed hard. "We barely know each other." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or satisfaction. "Don't we? I know you take your coffee black with 2 sugars. I know you have a scar on your left wrist from when you were 9 and thought you could fix your foster mother's broken window yourself. I know you read legal thrillers when you can't sleep, and you walk home instead of taking the subway because small spaces make you anxious after spending 3 days locked in a closet when you were 12. Emma stared at him, her heart pounding for an entirely different reason now. "How do you... I've been having you watched since the night we met." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Protected! I wasn't going to let anything happen to you." That's insane, obsessive, terrifying. "Why?" Marcus smiled, and it transformed his face from coldly beautiful to devastating. "Because from the moment you spilled wine on my jacket and apologized 6 times while trying not to cry, I knew. You were going to be mine, Emma. It was just a matter of time." She should run. She should be horrified. Instead, she found herself asking, "Then where were your people when I needed them? These past few days I've been terrified." His expression went dark. "My man watching your apartment building was pulled off rotation 3 days ago. Emergency situation with a shipment. By the time I realized and assigned someone else, you'd already picked up your shadow." His jaw tightened. "That won't happen again. Ever." "Marcus, I can't. This is too much. I have a job, a life. I can't just... You have a job where your boss threatens to fire you for mistakes you didn't make, where a colleague sabotages your work and you have no recourse. Marcus's hand moved to cup her jaw, tilting her face up. You have an apartment with locks that wouldn't stop a determined child. You have a life where you're vulnerable and alone, and I'm not going to stand by and watch while someone hurts you. I'm not your responsibility. No, he agreed. You're not my responsibility. You're mine. There's a difference. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was claiming and possessive and absolutely overwhelming. And Emma's hands came up to grip his jacket because her knees had gone weak. He tasted like whiskey and danger, and when his arm went around her waist, pulling her against him, she made a sound that was half protest, half surrender. When he finally pulled back, Emma was breathing hard, her lips tingling, her mind spinning. I'm going to take care of this, Marcus said, his thumb tracing her lower lip. The man following you, your problems at work, all of it. And then we're going to have a conversation about where you live and how many guards you're willing to tolerate. Guards? Emma's voice came out higher than usual. I don't need guards. You need to be safe. You need to sleep without fear. You need someone in your corner who has the resources and the willingness to do what's necessary. His eyes held hers. Let me be that person, Emma. She wanted to say no, wanted to be strong and independent and capable of handling her own problems. But God, she was so tired of being afraid. Just for a while, she heard herself say, until this is resolved. Marcus smiled like he'd won something much bigger than a temporary agreement. Of course, just for a while. He made a phone call, speaking rapid Italian to someone on the other end, and Emma caught maybe one word in 3. When he hung up, he turned back to her with that predatory focus that made her feel like the only person in the world. My people are handling it. By morning, you'll know who he is, who hired him, and why. And they'll know what happens to people who threaten what belongs to me. What if no one hired him? Emma asked. What if he's just some random stalker? Then he picked the wrong woman to fixate on. Marcus poured her a glass of wine and pressed it into her hands. Drink, you're shaking. She was. Emma sank into one of the leather chairs by the fire and took a sip of wine that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. What if this is all connected? The stalker, the problems at work. What if someone's trying to destroy your life? Marcus settled into the chair across from her. It's possible. In fact, it's likely. Which is why I'm going to find out who and why, and then I'm going to make them regret ever learning your name. Emma should have been disturbed by the casual way he talked about vengeance. Instead, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Someone was fighting for her. Someone powerful and capable and absolutely ruthless was on her side. I should call my boss, she said. Tell him I'm not coming in tomorrow. You're not going back there at all. Marcus's tone left no room for argument. I'm having your things collected from your apartment tonight. You'll stay here until this is resolved. Marcus, not negotiable, Emma. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes intense. Someone is targeting you. They know where you work and where you live. Until I know who and why, you're not going anywhere without protection. I can't just abandon my life. I'm not asking you to abandon it. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Emma stared into her wine, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 2 hours. This morning she'd been a terrified paralegal with a stalker. Now she was sitting in a mansion, drinking expensive wine, while the most dangerous man she'd ever met planned to dismantle the life of anyone who'd threatened her. Why me? She asked quietly. You could have anyone. Why are you doing all this for me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and crossed to her chair, crouching down so they were eye level. Do you remember what we talked about at the gala? After you spilled the wine? Emma nodded. You asked me what I wanted from life. I said security, safety, a place where I belonged. And I said I could give you all of that and more. His hand covered hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. I meant it. I've spent my entire life in a world where loyalty is bought, where trust is a weakness, where everyone wants something, and then you crashed into me with your cheap wine and your honest eyes, and you didn't want anything except to make sure my jacket wasn't ruined. It was a really nice jacket, Emma said, and was rewarded with a flash of his smile. You're real, Emma. In a world of facades and calculated moves, you're real, and I'm not letting you go. Before she could respond, his phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, and his expression went absolutely arctic. Where? A pause. How long? Another pause, and then, bring him to the warehouse. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and stood. They found him, your stalker. And you were right, someone hired him. Emma's heart lurched. Who? David Harrison, the colleague who's been sabotaging your work. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it more frightening. He hired someone to scare you, to make you unstable and unreliable. He wanted your job, and he was willing to destroy you to get it. The wine glass slipped from Emma's numb fingers, but Marcus caught it before it could fall. David? But why would he? We barely interact. I'm not standing in his way. You are when your boss promised his nephew the next senior paralegal position. Marcus's hand cupped her face. I'm going to go handle this. You're going to stay here, drink some water, maybe eat something. When I come back, it'll be over. What are you going to do to them? Emma whispered. What's necessary? He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Don't worry about the details. Just know that by tomorrow, David Harrison won't be working at Sterling & Associates. Or anywhere else in this city. Marcus, do you trust me? He asked it seriously, like her answer mattered. Did she? Emma looked at this man who'd inserted himself into her life with all the subtlety of a hurricane, who'd admitted to having her watched for months, who was probably about to do something violent and possibly illegal on her behalf. Yes, she said, and realized it was true. I trust you. Something softened in his expression. Good. That's a start. He kissed her again, slower this time, but no less intense. I'll be back in a few hours. Rest. You're safe here. And then he was gone, leaving Emma alone in the firelit study, with a head full of questions and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. The woman in the black dress, Sophia, she'd introduced herself as, brought Emma dinner on a tray. Pasta with cream sauce, fresh bread, a salad that looked like it had been composed by an artist. Emma ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. What was happening right now? What was Marcus doing? The not knowing gnawed at her, but part of her didn't want to know. She'd spent her whole life trying to be good, to follow the rules, to stay on the right side of every line. And in one evening, she'd stepped so far over those lines she couldn't even see them anymore. She should feel guilty, scared, something. Instead, she felt safe. For the first time in days, maybe in years, she felt truly safe. It was nearly midnight when she heard the car in the driveway. Emma was curled up on the sofa in the study, a book in her lap that she hadn't read a single word of, when Marcus walked in. He'd removed his jacket and tie, and there was a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when he saw her, some of that hardness melted away. It's done, he said simply. Emma set aside the book and stood. Is everyone okay? Everyone who matters. He crossed to the bar and poured himself a drink. David Harrison has been arrested for stalking, harassment, and conspiracy. Apparently, when the police searched his apartment, they found a lot of interesting things. Photos of you, detailed notes about your schedule, emails discussing payment to your stalker. How did they... Emma stopped. You planted evidence. I provided evidence that was already there. I just made sure it was found. Marcus took a long drink. He's going to prison, Emma. 5 to 10 years minimum. And your stalker is currently explaining to some very interested federal agents how David hired him to frighten you into a nervous breakdown. Federal agents? Turns out your stalker has warrants in 3 states. He was happy to cooperate in exchange for a plea deal. Marcus's smile was sharp. Justice system works beautifully when you know how to work it. Emma should have been appalled, should have been horrified by the casual way he'd manipulated the legal system, planted evidence, orchestrated an arrest. Instead, she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. He went very still for a moment. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him. "Thank you," Emma whispered into his chest. "Thank you for making me safe." "Always." His hand stroked her hair. "There's more. Your boss, Richard Sterling, is going to offer you David's position tomorrow. Senior paralegal, significant raise, your own office. How..." He received a call tonight from a very important client suggesting that Emma Carter was an invaluable asset who should be properly compensated and protected. Marcus pulled back enough to look at her. "You earned that position, Emma. You're brilliant at what you do. I just made sure the right people noticed. And if I don't want it?" The words surprised her even as she said them. "If I want to do something else entirely?" Interest sparked in his eyes. "What would you do?" "I don't know. I've spent so long just trying to survive. I never thought about what I actually want." Emma bit her lip. "Maybe I'd go back to school, get my law degree, or maybe I'd do something completely different. Travel, write, paint terrible watercolors of landscapes." Marcus laughed, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. "Terrible watercolors? I'm really bad at art," Emma admitted, "but I always wanted to try." "Then you'll try." He said it like it was already decided. "You'll do whatever you want, and I'll make sure you have everything you need to do it." "Marcus, I can't let you." "You can. You will." He cupped her face in both hands. "Emma, I told you at the gala that I could give you security and safety, and a place to belong. I meant every word. I want to give you the world. I want to give you choices. I want to give you a life where you never have to be afraid or uncertain or alone, ever again." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Why me?" "Because when I look at you, I see home." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "I've built an empire. I have money, power, respect, fear. But I've never had someone who looks at me like I'm just a man. Someone who's kind without ulterior motive. Someone real." His forehead touched hers. "You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." Tears burned Emma's eyes. "I'm not anyone special. I'm just... you're everything." He kissed her softly, reverently. "And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." "This is crazy," Emma said, but she was smiling through her tears. "We barely know each other. This is happening too fast. We have all the time in the world to get to know each other." Marcus smiled against her lips. "But Emma, I need you to understand something. I don't do anything halfway. If you let me into your life, really into your life, I'm not going anywhere. Ever. I'm the forever kind of obsessed. She should run. Should say no. Should protect her heart from the inevitable devastation of falling for a man who lived in a world of violence and danger and moral ambiguity." But Emma had spent her whole life being careful, being safe, following all the rules. And where had it gotten her? Alone. Afraid. Stalked by a man who wanted to destroy her for a job promotion. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay, yes. Whatever this is, I want it. I want you." The kiss he gave her then was nothing like the others. It was a promise and a claiming, and the beginning of something that felt inevitable, like every choice she'd ever made had been leading her to this moment, to this man, to this life she'd never imagined. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Move in with me, not just until this is resolved, permanently. That's a huge step. I don't care. I want you here, where I can keep you safe, where I can wake up next to you every morning." His hand slid into her hair. "Say yes, Emma." My lease isn't up for 6 months. I can't just... I'll buy out your lease. I'll have movers pack up your apartment tomorrow. He kissed her again, softer. Say yes. Emma knew she should think about it, should weigh the pros and cons, should be rational and careful. But looking into Marcus's eyes, feeling his arms around her, she didn't want to be careful anymore. Yes, she whispered. Yes. I'll move in with you. The smile that broke across his face was pure joy, and Emma realized she'd never seen him look happy before. Satisfied, yes. Pleased, amused. But not this unguarded happiness that made him look younger, more human. I love you, Marcus said, like it was the simplest truth in the world. I know it's too soon to say it, but I don't care. I've loved you since you stumbled into my life with wine stains and apologies, and I'm going to love you until my last breath. Emma's heart felt too big for her chest. That's very dramatic. I'm a dramatic man. He was smiling. Say you'll think about loving me back. I think, Emma said slowly, that I already do. A little bit. Maybe more than a little. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong under her palm. You terrify me. This whole situation terrifies me. But you also make me feel like maybe I can finally stop running from my own life and actually start living it. Then live it with me. Marcus kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Build it with me. I can give you safety and security and anything you want, but what I really want to give you is a life where you're never afraid again. A life where you're cherished and protected and free to become whoever you want to be. Even if I want to paint terrible watercolors, especially if you want to paint terrible watercolors, I'll build you a studio with perfect light and buy you every art supply in existence. He was grinning now. And I'll hang every terrible watercolor in every room of this house like they're masterpieces. Emma laughed, really laughed, and it felt like something inside her was healing. You're ridiculous. I'm in love. He picked her up and Emma squeaked in surprise, wrapping her arms around his neck. And I'm taking you upstairs to the bedroom you're going to share with me from now on. Marcus. To sleep, he clarified, though his eyes were dark with promise. Tonight, you sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk about everything else. Your job, your future, what you want from this life. But tonight, I just want to hold you and know that you're safe. As he carried her up the sweeping staircase, Emma thought about how her life had changed in the span of a single day. This morning, she'd been terrified and alone. Tonight, she was in the arms of a man who'd moved heaven and earth to protect her, who'd looked at her broken pieces and decided she was precious. It was crazy. It was too fast. It was probably going to be complicated and messy and difficult. But as Marcus laid her gently on the bed and stretched out beside her, pulling her into his arms, Emma decided she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. I love you too, she whispered into the darkness. I think I've loved you since the moment you laughed at your ruined jacket instead of getting angry. Marcus's arms tightened around her. Best $5,000 suit I ever owned. 5,000, Emma twisted to look at him. I spilled wine on a $5,000 suit? Worth every penny. He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. Sleep, Emma. When you wake up, your life is going to be different. Better. Everything you deserve and more. And wrapped in his arms, safe and warm and loved, Emma finally let herself believe it. 3 months later, Emma stood in front of an easel in the sun-drenched studio Marcus had built for her, squinting at her latest attempt at a landscape painting. It was objectively terrible. The trees looked like broccoli, the sky was a weird shade of purple, and she was pretty sure mountains weren't supposed to be that lumpy. It's beautiful, Marcus said from the doorway, and Emma could hear the smile in his voice. You're such a liar. But she was grinning as she turned to face him. It's awful, and you know it. It's yours. That makes it beautiful. He crossed the studio and wrapped his arms around her from behind. resting his chin on her shoulder. Besides, I've already ordered the frame. It's going in the main hallway. Please don't. Too late. I'm having a gallery wall made. All Emma Carter originals. He kissed her neck. How was class? Emma had started at the university last month, working toward her law degree. Turned out she had a gift for constitutional law that her professors kept praising. Good, exhausting. I have 3 papers due next week. Then I'll make sure you're not disturbed. His arms tightened. I have to go to New York tomorrow. Business. I'll be gone 3 days. I'll miss you. And she would. In the 3 months they'd been together, they'd barely spent a night apart. Come with me. Marcus turned her in his arms. We'll make it a long weekend. I'll show you the city properly. Take you to that gallery you've been wanting to visit. I have classes that you can miss once. He was using his persuasive voice, the one that made reasonable arguments sound irresistible. When was the last time you took a break? When you dragged me to the beach last month. Exactly, a whole month ago. He kissed her, soft and coaxing. Come with me, Emma. Let me spoil you. She pretended to think about it, even though they both knew she'd already decided. Fine, but I'm bringing my textbooks. Bring whatever you want. Marcus pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Emma's heart stopped. But first, I need to ask you something. Marcus, I know it's only been 3 months. I know everyone will say it's too fast, too soon, too crazy. He opened the box, revealing a ring that took Emma's breath away. A sapphire, surrounded by diamonds, old-fashioned and elegant, and absolutely perfect. But I've never been good at waiting for what I want, and what I want is you. Forever. Officially. Wearing my ring and my name, and standing beside me for the rest of our lives. Tears blurred Emma's vision. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything. He took her hand. Emma Carter, will you marry me? Will you let me love you and protect you and support every terrible watercolor you ever paint? Will you build a life with me that's messy and complicated and absolutely real? Emma thought about the woman she'd been 3 months ago. Terrified, alone, convinced she had to fight every battle by herself. She thought about the woman she was becoming, confident, loved, learning to accept help and protection and devotion from a man who'd proven over and over that he meant every promise he made. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, to all of it. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her like he'd never let her go. And outside the studio, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sun set over the estate that had become her home, painting the sky in shades of purple that were actually quite beautiful. Nothing like her terrible painting, but beautiful nonetheless. Emma's life hadn't turned out anything like she'd planned, but standing here in the arms of the man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and decided she was worth fighting for, she realized she didn't want her old plans anyway. This love, this life, this beautiful, complicated future stretching out before them was so much better than anything she could have imagined. And when Marcus whispered, "I love you," against her lips, Emma whispered it right back, meaning it with every piece of her healing, growing, finally believing in happy endings heart. The engagement party was Marcus's idea, though Emma suspected it was more about sending a message to his world than celebrating with friends. Still, as she stood in the ballroom of the Castellano estate wearing a dress that cost more than her old car, surrounded by people whose names appeared in financial magazines and society pages, she had to admit he'd done it beautifully. Candles everywhere, champagne flowing, and Marcus's hand never leaving the small of her back as he introduced her as his fiancée with unmistakable pride. "You're doing wonderfully," he murmured in her ear as they moved through the crowd. "Though you can stop looking like you're expecting an ambush." "I'm not—" Emma stopped because she absolutely was. These people were Marcus's world, and she was still getting used to the fact that she belonged in it now. A woman in her 60s approached, dripping in pearls and judgment. "Marcus, darling, I didn't realize you were seeing anyone." Her eyes raked over Emma with undisguised assessment. How did you two meet? She assaulted me with wine at a charity event, Marcus said smoothly, and I knew immediately she was the one. The woman's expression suggested she didn't find this charming. How unconventional. And what do you do, dear? I'm studying law, Emma said, lifting her chin slightly. Constitutional law, specifically. Oh, a student. The word dripped with condescension. How ambitious. Marcus's hand tightened on Emma's waist, a warning that he was about to say something cutting, but Emma squeezed his arm gently. She could handle this. Very ambitious, she agreed pleasantly. Almost as ambitious as someone who married into the Rothschild family and has been dining out on that connection for 40 years. The woman's face went red, and Marcus made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Before anyone could respond, his head of security, Vincent, the massive man who'd rescued her that first night, appeared at Marcus's elbow. Sir, a word. The tension in Vincent's voice made Emma's stomach clench. Marcus's expression didn't change, but she felt him go rigid beside her. Excuse us, he said smoothly to the pearl-laden woman, and guided Emma toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, with Vincent following. What is it? Marcus's voice had gone cold. Vincent leaned in, speaking low. Alessandro just arrived. He's at the front gate demanding entry. Says he needs to speak with you about urgent family business. Emma felt Marcus go absolutely still beside her. Alessandro is supposed to be in Rome. He says it can't wait. Vincent's expression was grim. He's got 4 men with him, none of ours. Who's Alessandro? Emma whispered. Marcus's jaw was tight. My cousin. We don't get along. He turned to Vincent. Tell him I'll meet him in my office in 10 minutes. Search him and his men. No weapons get past the foyer. Vincent nodded and disappeared. Marcus looked down at Emma, and she could see him calculating, trying to decide what to tell her. Don't, she said quietly. Don't try to protect me from whatever this is. We're getting married, Marcus. That means I'm in this with you. Something flickered in his eyes, pride, maybe, or relief. Alessandro has been trying to take over parts of my business for years. If he's here, it's not good. He cupped her face. Stay in the ballroom. Sophia will be with you. I'll handle this and be back as soon as I can. Marcus. Please, Emma. Let me keep you out of this one thing. He kissed her forehead. I'll tell you everything later. I promise. Emma wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was his world, the dangerous part she'd always known existed, but hadn't had to face directly yet. Be careful. Always, he signaled to Sophia, who appeared immediately. Stay with her. Don't let her out of your sight. And then he was gone, moving through the crowd with Vincent, leaving Emma standing there with dread pooling in her stomach. The party continued around her, but Emma couldn't focus on the conversations, or the music, or the champagne. Sophia stayed close, her eyes constantly scanning the room, and that more than anything told Emma this was serious. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Emma was considering ignoring Marcus's instructions and going to find him when she heard the first shout. It came from somewhere deeper in the house, muffled by distance and walls, but unmistakably angry. Several guests looked around uncertainly. Sophia's hand went to something under her jacket. We need to move you, Sophia said quietly. Now. I'm not leaving without Marcus. Miss Carter? The sound of a gunshot cut through the music like a knife. The ballroom erupted in chaos, people screaming, running for exits, champagne glasses shattering on marble floors. Sophia grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her toward a side door, but Emma wrenched free. I'm not leaving him! She was already running toward the sound of the shot, her heels clicking frantically on the floor. She could hear Sophia behind her, cursing in Italian, but Emma didn't stop. The hallway leading to Marcus's office was empty and eerily quiet after the chaos of the ballroom. Emma's heart hammered as she approached the closed office door. She could hear voices inside, angry, overlapping, speaking rapid Italian punctuated by Marcus's low, dangerous tones. She reached for the door handle just as it flew open. A man she didn't recognize stumbled out, blood streaming from his nose, and nearly crashed into her. Behind him, she could see Marcus standing in the middle of his office, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and murder in his eyes. 3 other men stood in defensive positions around the room, and another man, this one older, with Marcus's dark hair streaked with silver, stood behind the desk, holding a gun. "Emma, get out!" Marcus's voice cracked like a whip, but she was already moving into the room, her eyes on the gun. "You must be the fiancé," the older man, Alessandro, said, and his smile was nothing like Marcus's. It was cruel and calculating. How convenient. We were just discussing family business. "Put the gun down," Emma said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Alessandro laughed. "American girls. So bold." "Marcus, where did you find this one?" "Emma, leave. Now." Marcus didn't take his eyes off his cousin, but she could see the tension in every line of his body. "Please." "I'm not going anywhere." Emma took another step into the room, very aware of Sophia behind her and Vincent appearing in the doorway. "You're at an engagement party. You're in Marcus's home. Whatever your problem is, you're not going to solve it by threatening people." "Threatening?" Alessandro's expression darkened. "I'm protecting what's mine. Marcus has been expanding into territories that belong to my family." "Your family?" Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. "You mean the businesses you've run into the ground through incompetence and greed? The operations that were failing until I stepped in? You had no right." "I had every right. The council approved the transition." Marcus took a step forward, and Emma's breath caught. "You've been skimming from the top, Alessandro. Cutting product, shorting payments, making us all look weak. I gave you a chance to clean up your act. Instead, you came into my home with guns." The tension in the room was suffocating. Emma could see Alessandro's finger on the trigger, could see the barely controlled violence in Marcus's stance. One wrong move, and everything would explode. "Maybe," Emma said, her voice cutting through the tension, "we should all take a breath and discuss this like rational adults instead of characters in a bad gangster movie." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Alessandro started laughing, a genuine sound of surprise. "She has no idea who you are, does she?" He looked at Marcus. "Does she know what you've done? How many bodies you've buried? Does she know about the shipping business, the real one, not the one on paper?" "She knows enough," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Alessandro. "She knows I would die before I let anyone hurt her. She knows that includes you, cousin or not." "Touching." Alessandro's humor vanished. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over the eastern ports. Tonight. Or I'm going to make sure the federal agents who've been sniffing around your operations get a very detailed package about your activities." Emma felt her blood run cold. Federal agents. Marcus had told her his business was complicated, that there were gray areas, but hearing it laid out so baldly made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Marcus didn't even blink. "You're bluffing. If you had anything concrete, you'd have already used it. Try me." Alessandro raised the gun slightly. "Sign the papers, Marcus, or I'll destroy everything you've built." "No," Emma said, and 6 pairs of eyes turned to her. "You won't." She pulled out her phone, very conscious of the gun still pointed in Marcus's direction, and pulled up a video file. "You know, it's funny. When someone's threatening your fiancé, you get creative." She held up the phone so Alessandro could see the screen. "That's you. 3 hours ago, meeting with an FBI agent named Morrison in a parking garage downtown." Alessandro's face went white. "You're lying." "Am I? Want to hear the audio? You were very detailed about your plans to frame Marcus. Something about planted evidence and falsified shipping manifests." Emma's hand was shaking, but she kept her voice level. "Turns out, Agent Morrison has been on Marcus's payroll for 18 months. Every word you said was recorded. That's impossible. Is it?" Marcus's smile was razor-sharp. "Did you really think I wouldn't have people watching you? That I wouldn't know the second you landed in this country?" He took another step forward. You're done, Alessandro. You're going to leave this house, get on a plane back to Rome, and retire. Effective immediately. And if I ever hear from you again, that recording goes to every family council member and federal prosecutor in 3 states. You can't. I already have. Marcus pulled out his own phone and showed Alessandro the screen. Every family head received a copy 5 minutes ago, along with documentation of every time you've stolen from us, lied to us, and put our operations at risk. The council has voted. You're out. Alessandro looked between Marcus and Emma, and she could see the moment he realized he'd lost. The gun lowered slightly, and Vincent moved with sudden speed, crossing the room and taking the weapon before Alessandro could react. Get him out of here, Marcus said quietly. Make sure he understands what happens if he ever comes back.
Vincent and 2 other men escorted Alessandro and his crew from the office. The remaining guards disappeared, leaving Emma and Marcus alone in the sudden silence. Emma's legs gave out, and she sank into one of the office chairs, adrenaline making her hands shake. I wasn't sure that would work. Marcus was beside her instantly, kneeling in front of her chair, his hands covering hers. How did you know about Morrison?
I didn't. Not until tonight. Emma managed a shaky laugh. Vincent mentioned Morrison to you last week when I was in the room. You got very quiet, and I saw you text someone immediately after. I figured he was either a threat or an asset. When I saw Alessandro arrive tonight, I gambled that you'd have him followed. She looked up at Marcus. Did I guess right? You magnificent, brilliant, terrifying woman. Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Yes, Morrison's been feeding me information. Yes, I had Alessandro followed. But how did you know he'd met with Morrison? I didn't. Emma pressed her face against his shoulder. I made it up, but his reaction told me I was close enough to make him doubt himself. Marcus pulled back to look at her, and there was something like awe in his expression. You bluffed Alessandro Castellano with a fake video file. I bluffed Alessandro Castellano with a notes app open on my phone. Emma started laughing, slightly hysterical. Oh, God, I could have gotten us both killed. But you didn't. Marcus cupped her face in both hands. You walked into a room with armed men and saved my life with nothing but nerve and guesswork. He kissed her fiercely. You're absolutely insane, and I love you more than I thought possible. I love you too. Emma kissed him back, tasting relief and adrenaline and the promise of a future that was definitely going to be interesting. But Marcus, we need to talk about the FBI agent on your payroll and what exactly you're shipping through those eastern ports. We will. He stood, pulling her up with him. We'll talk about all of it. Every detail, every risk, every gray area. But right now, we have a ballroom full of terrified guests who think someone was just murdered. And we need to convince them everything is fine. Is everything fine? Emma asked quietly. Marcus was silent for a moment, his thumb tracing the engagement ring on her finger. Alessandro was the last real threat to my position. With him gone, things will stabilize. And yes, there are aspects of my business that exist in legal gray areas. But Emma, I'm working on transitioning everything to legitimate operations. It's slow and it's complicated, but in 5 years, the Castellano name will be completely clean. He met her eyes. Can you live with that? With the man I am now, while I become the man I want to be? Emma thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, terrified and alone, and the woman she was now, standing in the office of a man with blood on his hands and love in his eyes, having just bluffed her way through a confrontation with armed criminals. She thought about her ring and her terrible paintings, and the life they were building together. Yes, she said simply, but I have conditions. Name them. No more secrets. If something threatens us, you tell me. We face it together. She poked his chest. And I'm finishing my law degree. If we're going to make your business legitimate, you're going to need a lawyer who actually cares about keeping you out of prison. Marcus's smile was brilliant. Deal. Any other conditions? You're hanging my terrible watercolors in your office. Already planned on it. He kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. Anything else? Emma pretended to think about it. The wedding is happening within 3 months. I'm not having a long engagement with someone who has armed cousins. 2 months, Marcus countered. I'm not waiting any longer than that to make you officially mine. Deal. Emma took his hand. Now let's go convince your guests that our engagement party didn't just turn into a crime scene. They walked back to the ballroom together, Marcus's arm around her waist, and Emma realized that this beautiful, complicated, occasionally terrifying partnership was exactly what she'd been searching for her entire life. Not perfection, but reality. Not a fairy tale, but a true story being written one day at a time by 2 people who'd found each other against all odds. The ballroom had cleared significantly, but the guests who remained broke into applause when Marcus and Emma appeared. Marcus raised his voice to address the room. Apologies for the disruption. Family business that required immediate attention. Everything is resolved. He pulled Emma closer. And I'd like to take this opportunity to announce that Emma has graciously agreed to marry me in 2 months. You're all invited. There were cheers and congratulations, and Emma found herself surrounded by well-wishers who'd apparently decided that surviving gunfire made her automatically acceptable. Sophia appeared with fresh champagne, and Vincent gave her a nod of respect that Emma treasured more than any of the superficial compliments. Later, after the last guests had left and the house was quiet, Emma and Marcus stood in their bedroom watching the sun come up over the estate grounds. Are you sure about this? Marcus asked quietly. It's not too late to run, to choose a safer, simpler life. Emma turned in his arms. I've had safe and simple. It was lonely and terrifying in its own way. She touched his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. This, us, might be complicated and occasionally dangerous, but it's real. It's ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Marcus kissed her like she was precious and powerful and everything he'd ever wanted. Then let's build something extraordinary together, Mrs. Castellano to be. Something worth fighting for. We already have, Emma whispered against his lips. And as the morning light spilled into the room, painting everything gold, Emma Carter, former paralegal, current law student, future wife to the most dangerous and devoted man she'd ever known, believed it with every fiber of her being. This was her life now. Complicated, imperfect, absolutely real. And she wouldn't have it any other way.